Welcome everyone to a new tutorial series on Advanced Tactics Gold. This will be basically a walkthrough, play with me, play along series that we're specifically designed to get people into Advanced Tactics who think it might be a little intimidating. So we're going to load a scenario. By the way, I should mention how you're going to play the game later is probably just by creating a new Dawn random game. You can choose whatever settings you want. Extra settings here if you prefer to change those, and then you just hit make and the game will create a random map for you, which is pretty cool. If you don't like it, you just hit back when it finishes loading. Come on, computer, you can do it. I did not anticipate this delay. But anyways, we'll be doing there it is. Okay, so it creates a random map. You say, okay, I don't like this map for whatever reasons, or you hit edit to look into it, whatever. But for us, okay, one other thing I'll mention is you can also load up the games tutorial. But if you do that, I suppose I might as well load this up as well. You absolutely have to hit open the scenario website. Without the scenario website, the game is impossible to follow. It's just a random map with no tutorial pop-ups. So make sure you do that if you want the tutorial. Otherwise, you can just follow along with me. We'll be doing load scenario. We'll go to New Dawn. And we're going to play German-Soviet with leaders. Basically, this is a symmetric map. I guess the Soviets have 2 extra divisions for balancing because they go second. We don't want the AI to play, which is going to eliminate all the random elements that we can. So we hit edit, go up here to the reg, click on Eurasia, and AI false instead of true. This, by the way, is where you can make any changes to the game maps you'd like. Like, let's say, oh, this looks all good, but I'd rather this be a field instead of or a plains instead of a field. We go over, we click, and now it's, it's a plain, it's fields, now it's plains over here. Doesn't matter. So go ahead and hit X. This is the current map that you have just edited, well, that I've edited. And let's all start this one. So if we're playing both sides, you'll be able to play along with me. Hopefully the maps will, combat is going to be random, but more or less, you'll be playing the exact same game with me, and I feel like this is the best way for people to learn, is just to play along. So here's our game world. If we hit minus and plus down here, you can also use minus and plus on your keyboard. This zooms us out. The map options I'm going to play with, if we go to system options here, I'm going to choose to raster the grid. I think the game looks a little better without the grid rastered, so with like this. But just for the purposes of showing the mechanics of the game, it's going to be easier for us to count hexes very easily. And I don't think we need hex coloring because there's only 2 nations, so the dividing line just clearly shows that I'm on the left and the other nation's on the right. Probably you don't need hex coloring unless you have like 4 or 5 players. So otherwise, when you have that many, it can get a little confusing. On the top we have the just general information. My regime, the people type I am, German versus Russian versus the Western forces like British and American are combined into one, Japanese, Chinese, etc. The round, there's no importance attributed to the date. There's no like point at which technology is available or whatever. You might as well count this, treat this the same way as you would just a turn counter, like number 1, and it goes in 1-month intervals, so we'll never see the 15th change. It'll be June 15th right now, and then next month it'll be July 15th. That'll be round number 2, etc. Political points, you can kind of think of this as like an officer pool or a specialized pool. It is resources that you generate the same way as you generate infantry and other things at your cities. But it's for creating headquarters, creating blank divisions, like setting up a division. So there's like you would assume some kind of officers you need to pull from in order to do that. If you want to build a factory, well, then you're going to have to send, request the special materials, get the special people over to build a factory. All that, there's a component of what's called PP, political power, in all those things. I don't know, you can abstract it any way you want. I kind of abstract it as a limited officer pool that you have. RAWs is just going to restrict you in the way you'd imagine, that you can't build 1 million tanks in a turn if you don't have the RAWs to do it. Oil, same, very intuitive here that your mechanized units, your motorized units are going to be using fuel when they move. So anything that requires an engine to run is going to take oil to move. Okay, on the right we have our mini-map on the top right. Hex and location will be the same for most hexes. We can see that hex and location are identical for any of these, but the only thing that's going to change is if you click on a specialized hex, like here we have an oil field. So the hex is oil, the location goes to location type. These things aren't updating immediately just because I forgot to exit out of system options. Now we can see them update faster. So an airbase, it has some general information type, but location specifies things about the structure there. The way you can think of this is there's still a field hex, so these are fields. There's still a field hex underneath this airbase, so that's what this left hex thing is going to indicate to us, what the landscape type is. But on the right you have location, which just shows you, is there something special on top of that landscape type. So for example, you have cities here. This is suburban, but it has almost all the same statistics as a city, but the city has a special location on top of that urban structure. So you can see now that we have a city which has production, has structural points. These we'll talk about more later, but you can think of it as how intact the source is. Okay, so what I want to cover in this video is actually, besides going through all this very briefly, the graphical user interface options. I think we covered those. Plus minus down here. By the way, sometimes you'll adjust like hex coloring or raster or grid, whatever. If any of those options don't update, just hit plus minus and it'll update the view. We're playing on a relatively small map, as you can see. That's going to be just fine for us. We're just trying to learn some of the concepts of the game. Most of the time I'm going to be zoomed all the way in like this, and there's, let's see, let me just move. You don't know how to do this yet, or maybe you do, but I'm just going to move those two units. You can see that I have the system set up where if multiple units are in the same hex, they stack side by side as much as possible. You can change that here. I can get them to stack where I have to click through each one, but they show up a little bit larger. I prefer this side by side method, so that's what I'll be using. If you ever are wondering what it says underneath a bunch of units, you can click this, which actually turns off the markers for a moment. I don't think you're going to play very long like that. So, and everything else I think we'll just touch as we go along. Okay, so movement. Movement is done through action points, which is in the top left here. If you click on any division, you bring up the division card, so this is just clicking on a hex, but if we click on any hex with a unit, it brings up the units. I've just selected here the 11th division. This is the general information on the left. On the right you have specific information. So first we're looking at the subformations. This is the division composition. So this one has so and so many rifles, mortars, etc. Logistics is supplies. We'll touch more about this later. And analysis, we'll probably have to talk about this a little in this video, even though it's a bit more complicated. It talks about, discusses basically, shows you if you have the capacity to carry people with any kind of subformation, it describes to you what is being carried. So in our subformations we have 3 horses and 1 AT gun. Then the rest is infantry. Infantry moves faster than AT guns. So what's happening with the analysis here is it's saying our horses have 10 capacity to carry each. So they have 30 total. Our artillery has a weight of 10. Doesn't have any capacity to carry itself. And the foot, what I mean by carry itself, I don't mean like it doesn't, it can move on its own, but it won't be able to carry any other units. And frankly, you wouldn't need or want artillery carrying anything anyway, because it moves like the slowest out of every other unit. And then we also have our foot soldiers, our infantry. These have a total weight of 36. This is just 1 weight per unit. So I'll show how to look up these things in a second. But this is showing us that basically our horses can carry 30. We have a total of 46 other people who are not being carried though. Who we have the option to carry, I should say. We can see our stack penalty here as well. It's also available in the top right over here. We'll talk more about that later. But basically it's saying that 46 of the 30 are carried. Now it's showing over here that our movement speed is foot, and this is because the horses will try to pick up the slowest unit first. And in that case, it's the artillery. Since that only weighs 10, one of the horses is carrying it, and the other two horses, I guess, are just kind of acting as... They don't help our overall unit speed because we can't carry every infantry, and we always move at the rate of our slowest unit. But they are technically carrying 20 of the other infantry units, which, like I said, it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't affect anything. But that's technically where the rest of this 20 is going, is to the other infantry. But the only one that matters is that we carry the artillery. Okay, now actually going into movement is going to take action points. If I click on this unit and I click move here, we can see that a little gray grid appears, like overlays itself on top of the terrain. This is the maximum distance I can cover. Now note that Advanced Tactics School doesn't have an option to move multiple turns distance. You can't just set like waypoints or anything. It's a very simple game mechanic for moving, which means that sometimes you actually have to do the calculation yourself for the fastest movement route. I know that's probably not like everyone's favorite thing, but in general, you are only ever going to be wanting to move within the maximum distance you can move. Especially when the war starts, you're going to be right up against the enemy forces, so it won't be as big of a deal. So having clicked that move, we see that this is the areas I can move. In general, with 100 action points, infantry can move, I would say, 3 hexes in friendly territory and 2 hexes in enemy territory. The reason for that is it takes an additional... We see that over here, the plus AP is 0 because this is friendly territory, and over here, plus AP is 10. This is an additional 10 action points to move into there, so it's more costly, which means you're moving slower. I think this is fairly easily abstracted, as when you're moving in friendly territory, you can march at a very fast pace. You're not expecting any surprises. But when you move into an area of conflict, you have to advance a little more cautiously, and that shows in the movement rate. So going back to the movement key, we see that movement cost is 0 if this is the information bar right here. We'll have to pay close attention to this very often. And in this bar, it's showing us the movement cost is 0 for here. It's 30 to move here, or here, or here, or here. Now, if I look over here, if I move, let's say over here, it now costs 60, which is, now I'm going to right click. Left click would have me actually move, but right click allows you to bring up the information on the hex on the top, on the right. So by right clicking, I can see that this is urban. If I right click here, this is fields. So if I was to move from here and then here, it would move me through two hexes where my infantry costs only 30 action points. So we see movement cost 30, and then movement 60. If, however, I choose to move into the mountains, the low mountains, this will cost 70, 30, and then another 40. Because low mountains cost a little bit more action points for infantry to move in. If we want to see these things, if we want to see the carrying capacity, all these things, what you should do is left click on any subformation. I'll left click on the rifleman. This brings up your detailed information. If we go to general, it's going to show me that my movement type is foot. This is my supply, which we'll cover later. This is my carrying capacity and my weight. So we can see that each infantry weighs 1, but can carry 0. I go over to combat, and is that, sorry, landscape. Let's go over to landscape. And this shows me the action points to move into any hex. We see that plains, fields, forests, they're all the same for infantry, including cities. They're all just 30 action points. So that's, the higher the number here, the slower they're moving, because it costs more action points. And if you only have 100 action points, you can move 3 times in a plains or fields, because that would be only 90 action points. But you could only move twice in low mountains, because twice would be 80, 3 times would be 120, and that would exceed the normal allotment of 100 action points. And that's also where this plus AP penalty comes in. We can only move 2 generally, because although fields and plains and forests are 30, this 10 action point penalty for moving through foreign territory makes it 40, and that usually means we can only move twice, 40 and then 80. The extra action points don't mean anything. You don't get to cash them in for anything special. So really, you should try to maximize your usage of action points if your goal is to move as far as possible. Going back to the move function again, now we know that this is 30, this is 40. In the same way, even though this is fields, this is 30, and this is also 40 because of the 10 action point penalty. Now, what we actually want to do on this turn is just move our units forward. Let's go ahead and approach, hopefully confront, the Soviet line. I'm moving like this, and now we get a new dynamic, which is zone of control. So the hexes on this game are abstracted to be large enough that in some war games, hex-based war games, zone of control, like even in, I think, the Civilization 5, or maybe even other Civilization games, you can't move from one area of enemy zone of control to another, and that's very standard in your war game, your hex-based war games. The field of battle is a little bit larger, so each hex covers a little more space, so it's probably not in the game developer's design to have you completely pinned down when you're next to an enemy. They just have you expend slightly more movement points to move into a zone, a hex of enemy control. Zone of control. So although it took 70 action points for this unit to move, 30 and then 40, it's now going to cost 80 for this unit to move here because it'll be 30. 30 to move here, plus 10 action points, but also plus another 10 action points because we know we're moving into an enemy zone of control. So we can see 30 here, I'll do it step by step, and now 50 here. That's fine. So that's just the 30 to move here, the 10 for the extra, the foreign territory, and now we have the 10 that we did from the zone of control of this guy. This guy didn't suffer that zone of control because we didn't know any better. And you may think that that's kind of cheating, but no. Actually, because we didn't know about these forces, it was possible for us to get a surprise attack if we accidentally moved over here. So that's the risk. If you move one at a time, you'll reveal the zone of controls. But if you move faster, you won't get the zone of control penalty, but it's possible you'll walk into an enemy unit. And if you enter the hex of an enemy unit without specifically attacking, they get a surprise attack on you, which is pretty devastating. So continuing the trend, we'll just move our units forward. I think I'll move... We don't know where their other units are, but we can see that maybe, okay, good move. Move up there, and we'll get this guy to pinch off the marsh. Now marsh costs 35 to move in, so it's 35. Another 35 for swamp, that's 70. Then we have the plus 10 for foreign and plus 10 for zone of control, which gives us 90. So that guy's completely moved. The other guys, I'm going to start using the keyboard, which you can see they show you that M in the little bracket here, they show the shortcut for the keyboard. This game doesn't follow WASD for the shortcuts. Basically, it just takes the first letter of whatever action you're trying to do. So in this case, move is M, and we move across. There are some dynamics with movement I'm ignoring right now, like bridge movement or moving over a river, but it's a little more complicated, and maybe I'll cover it on the next turn. I'm going to leave this headquarters here. Let's get this guy in Breslau to push into the marsh. So it'll cost 65 here. If we moved here and then here, it would be 70. But the game will always choose the lowest. This is a good example. We move here, it's 35. We move here through the forest, it's only 30. The game's going to choose the lower action points of these two. So although it would be 70 if we took the marsh to the marsh, taking the forest to the marsh is only 65, and that's what the game chooses. So we'll move forward 65. These guys will also slide forward. Just one. Okay, yeah, I think we'll just slide forward one with these, which will leave us a little more reactionary up in the north, but we're probably trying to push more in the south. Okay, I don't think we need to move our headquarters out of Odessa. We'll get this guy in Milan to move forward as far as he can. So as we see, 3 hexes in friendly territory. And I think that's everything we want to cover for this turn. So I hope that helped you understand how movement and action points go. Note that if you ever are wondering why a specific unit has the action point penalty it does, just click on the subformation, like we can click on the horses here, go to landscape, and it'll show all their action points. Now we weren't moving at 25 through the fields or the forest, because we always move at the rate of the slowest unit, which in that case was the infantry. The slowest unit would be the artillery, but since the horse is pulling it, the artillery takes the horse's movement speed, so it'll take all these action points. So, and this will show you the action point penalty for crossing a river or a stream. Obviously, if it's a bridge, that penalty is ignored. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more of my tutorial series. Since this is the first video of the tutorial, if you wouldn't mind leaving a thumbs up if you appreciated this, or if you're interested in seeing more, it'll help me on the YouTube being able to find the video, and also it'll give me a good barometer of how much interest there is in this series anyway. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in tutorial video number 2.